So today we'll cover this initializer list. Okay, yeah, and I will jump into code directly because I believe in code more than theory. So let's go there. Okay, so let's say we have a class and we have some members in it. Okay, so and let's make it public. And we have a constructor. Okay, so if we create an object of this class, now it's okay if we create an object like this, it will call this default constructor of the class, but it will not initialize the values of this class, right? So what we can do is we can write it like x equals to 0, y equals to 0, right? It will initialize the values. You can add one print function to see what's happening. Now if we'll print here, let's do, we have 0 initialized here because we only printed x right now here. Okay, so what we did is we created an object, and at this line constructor of this class foo get called, and it initialize the values x. But do you know this is a two-step process, right? When we call a constructor here, okay, it will create a memory for these two member variables first, and then it will assign values to it. Okay, so what we can do is we can create a initializer list, and let's first check whether whatever I am saying that is correct or not, right? Let's test that. Say we have a class boo. Okay, in that we have a class member, and just for simplicity I am making everything public here. Now we have a constructor for this, and let's create a default constructor, and we'll just print default constructor. Okay, let's make one more constructor. It will take an integer value x. Parameterized constructor. Okay. We'll create one object of this class foo. Now let's try to run this. Let's see what happens. It called default constructor of this class. Okay. Now let's call. Now let's see what initializer list do here first. So this is the way, means what happens when we write like this. This foo class, it's first call the constructor of base class. It says that you initialize your member variables. It says to the base class, and base class initialize all those members. And once that is done, it will that derived class will do initialization for its own members. So instead of doing these two step, this process means we are writing here. Actually, this is not initialization. This is assignment. Okay. So what we can do to initialize members. So there is a syntax, means a new concept. This initializer list is given in C++, where we can initialize the members of a class here only in this initializer list. Okay, so this is initializer list. So now what will happen at this line is, as soon as memory is created for this variable member x or member y, at that time only this will be initialized. Okay, so these are initialized, right? So now let's say we have this object one here. Okay, we'll initialize it inside. Okay, so what we'll do is here object one equals to, and like this we'll do this. Okay, so what will happen, let's see. You'll see first default constructor is called, okay, when we created this object, and then parameterized constructor is called for this, and then this is assigned to object one. So this is two-step process. Okay, so how initializer list help here is, if we write the same thing here, okay, what we did in initializer list, we are creating this object one, means and we are passing this initialization value, means with which we want to initialize it. Here you will see only parameterized constructor is called. Okay, means this object is created using its parameterized constructor, and we saved a one call to default constructor here. Okay, so as soon as the memory is allocated for this object, it is initialized. Earlier one was assignment. Okay, so we can think of this in these three lines. How this process will happen means inside this, it will create a memory for a temp object, and then it will assign temp object to object for this. But in case of this, as soon as memory is allocated, it will be initialized with this temporary object which we are passing here. Okay, clear here? So this is the one very important use. You can initialize all your members here only. And if you have a class object, it will obviously save couple of calls. So if you have lots of classes, means you will save lots of operations. Means instead of doing three steps, it will be a one-step process. Okay. Okay. So one good use of let me clear this. I will upload all these code which we are doing here on GitHub, so you can refer it later on. Now, if we have a member in a class with just, let's say, a string we have, and the parameter we are passing to a constructor is also a string. Okay, so what will happen? Let's see. Where it is undefined reference to. Okay. So can you see what happened? Actually, when we created this object, okay, we passed a string into this as str. Okay, we copied this str into str. We printed this str. This is fine. We got this test. Okay. Now, when we call this print function, there is nothing we received. Nothing is printed. Why? And we can test it. If I comment out this line and I show you, there is no test printed. So what happened is when you do assignment like this, it will not copy here. It will treat as str is str, means same. You are not actually assigning here in this str. So to solve this, what you can do is either you write this like this. Okay, this will solve a problem. See, we have test method. Another way is you can use initializer list. See, So what initializer list do is it now this str is member of this class. It is initializing with this str which is passed here. So we can pass same name in a parameter also if we use str, or we'll have to use this operator. So again, this will become a assignment. So better to use initializer list. Okay, clear here? So now if suppose we have a, let's remove all this. We have a class. Okay, in this class we have one constant parameter member in it. Okay, so if you want to initialize this constant member here, you have only one choice to initialize it as soon as you create a memory for this, because we know if we want to create a constant object, so we'll have to initialize it at that time only. We cannot write like constant int x and then after that x is equal to something, right? So to do that, if I try to run this will not compile. If I compile it, there is error. Const integer we have. If you have a const variable, you will have to use initializer list. There is no other way. Okay. If you have parameterized, you will use like this. Okay. No, it will not print. Sorry, because we don't have any print statement here. Let's create a parameterized object. Let's pass it 25. 25. We updated this value. Same, if you have a reference, okay, you will have to initialize. See, as soon as I added this will give us error. Uninitialized reference member in int. Okay, so we'll have to initialize it here only. Let's initialize it with also with a. Let's run this. What it is saying as okay. Two curly braces here. Cannot bind non-constant L value reference to this because this is a reference and we cannot add L value reference here. So in default constructor we cannot do this. So if you have a a reference will have to use parameterized constructor. Oh, I wanted this also. Object 3, because we do not have any default constructor. This is, we are printing X, and let's say we print Y also. I do lots of typing mistakes. Okay. So if you have a reference, you do not have any other choice. You have constant, you do not have any other choice to do that. And if you have reference, so you will have to use parameterized constructor only. Okay. Now, these are few reasons we should use initializer list. Now let's see, if we have a class foo which has a constructor, default constructor, we have another class bar, it also has a default constructor. Okay, and we create an object of bar. Okay, what will happen? It will print first call constructor of foo, and then it will call constructor of bar. Okay, because each class means derived class, each class can initialize members of its own. So it will call base class that you do initialization whatever you want to do for your members, and then I will proceed for mine. So first it will call base class. Now let's say if we have a parameterized constructor here, okay, and let's print it here. Now what will happen? Error. No matching function to call. Okay, because here this bar function is looking for some default constructor, but we do not have any default constructor here. Okay, so it will give us error. How you will solve this? To solve this, we can use initializer list and we can pass some value to foo's default parameterized constructor. Okay, so what we are doing is, when we are creating this object, it will call its constructor, and at the same time it will call the constructor of the base class which takes one parameter. Okay, so called constructor of this base class foo constructor, and then printed x. Okay, you can see here 4, and then it printed bar constructor. Okay, so if suppose you have more than one constructor, parameterized constructor here, which takes let's say 2 3 parameters or different kind of parameters. So In initializer list, you can decide which constructor, which of the base class constructor you want to call. You can decide here. If you will not use this, by default it will call base class default constructor. So this is the place you can decide which one you should call, because sometimes it happens that class do not have any default constructor, and when it happens, means as soon as you created any constructor, it will assume that there should not be any implicit default constructor as soon as you write any constructor. Even you write like foo delete, if you write this, or if you write default, in either case, in either case, compiler will not generate a default constructor. Okay, so if you have nothing here in this class, then only compiler will generate a default constructor. Okay, clear? So if you do not have default constructor, always use initializer list. Okay. Now there is one very good use of initializer list is, you would have used sometimes like this, and it will also tell you the difference between why we use parenthesis, why we should not use parenthesis, and we should use curly braces, because we all use parenthesis. If you used older versions or something, you would have used this sorry, parenthesis to initialize your objects in initializer. But now in later C++ 11, 14 onwards, they are uh, suggesting forcefully suggesting that you should use curly braces over this parenthesis. Parenthesis will still work. Okay, it is not removed from C++ for backward compatibility, but going forward, they are suggesting to use curly braces, and there is a reason to do that. Okay, let's say I create an integer I and I initialize it with a integer value. Okay, it's fine, no problem in this. Now let's initialize it with a float value, double value. What will happen? Any guess? Are you guys there? Okay, but there is no error. It did not. And if you see, it implicitly converted this value into integer. Okay, but if same thing you do like this, it will give error. Narrowing conversion from double to integer, it will not allow you. So if you are using like this, compiler will implicitly convert it into integer and you will lose the fraction part. Okay. And as soon as you use these curly braces, so what it will do is, as soon as it allocated memory for j, it will try to initialize it with 7.8 and compiler will find that there is narrowing and it will give you error. Some compilers give it as a warning, okay, but you consider this is not right. Okay, let's see another example. We create a vector of int, and let's initialize it with double. Okay, what will happen? Will it compile? Sorry, we have this line. Yes, it compiled. But what actually, whether this is right? No, because we have a vector of int, so it will implicitly convert it. So instead of this, if we write like this, use curly braces, it will give you warning error. Sorry, it's a different error. Narrowing conversion from double to int. Okay, so it means it is not good to use means to avoid this implicit conversion. We should use this initializer list. Okay. Let's see one more example. Let's create a class. Let's create one character inside this, and in our constructor pass it uh, integer value. Let's use older way of initializing. Okay, let's print it in as an integer, convert it as an integer, and then oh sorry. Okay, now we create an object, it obj, and we pass it 300. Let's run this. What happened? Oh, I had to type cast and I call default constructor of int. Okay, again syntax error. Okay, so let's run this. 44. Okay, what it did is we passed 300 here. Okay, but it converted it, means it implicitly converted it into character. So a character can have 255, till 255 it can have, because it's a 1 byte. All right, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. So what it will do is it will decrease the amount, means whatever is left over, it will use it. So it did implicit conversion here, integer to character. Okay, clear? Now, instead, yeah, instead of this parenthesis, if I use curly braces here, it will give me a warning that some conversion is going to happen. So you will get a warning. Okay. So what happens when you do something, you write something in code by your own. So compiler assumes that a programmer is more intelligent than compiler. So it take it that. So it will allow you to do this. Okay. If you will run this, it will run and it will give you same output, but it will tell you a warning that there is something happening, narrowing happening. You just check it. So this is a good way. If you miss, why you should use curly braces and why should you should not use parenthesis. Okay, but sometimes you need narrowing. Let's see why sometimes it will be required. If you write, if you create a character with a, okay, and if you create another character c1 and you are doing c plus 1, you are just trying to increment it in its initialize c1 with b. Okay, but you are using like this, so it will give you a warning here that narrowing is happening, because this is int and this is character, but you actually want this. Okay, so what you can do is either you can write it like this. You use a static cast. So as I said, if you are using a static cast, compiler will assume that programmer is more intelligent. So if anything happening, so it's programmer's responsibility. Okay, so compiler will not give you any kind of error. Okay, we got this because of this class. So let's comment out this class. You will not get anything because of this static cast. Or you can use like this assignment. This is assignment. So in this case, you are assigning, you are not initializing. Okay. Or you can use the older way, initialize using parentheses. This will also. So you will have to decide when you want to use parentheses and when you want to use curly braces. If you have no valid reason to use parentheses, always try to use curly braces. Okay, is it clear till now? So there is one more thing I'll show you. Let's move on this. So if you have a class, let's example we take this class. Okay, and in main let's create an object of test A. Object of this. Okay, so what will be called default constructor, right? If we create another object B and we pass a parameter. So just before I'll explain this, just want to show you this standard initializer list is a list provided in C++ which we can use for initialization and initialization. Okay, so if we have two constructor, one with default means it's a kind of default constructor, okay, and one with the initializer list. So just I want to show you here which one will call in which case. Okay, so if you have this B with parameter, again a default constructor is called because we are using parentheses. When you are using parentheses, always this constructor will get called. Okay, we'll see when another initializer list constructor will call. Okay, if we have a test C and we initialize it with say 66, default constructor, all good. Now we create a object with curly braces. So any guess which constructor will get called? Anyone? Are you there? Can you guys hear me? Yes, Yogesh, we can. I can hear you. It will call default constructor. Any reason? Okay, 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 okay. Anyone else? Any reason and or any clue which this constructor will get called? Okay, so it will actually call default constructor because when you do not have any parameter passed to this into this curly braces, it will assume a default constructor. As soon as you pass some value into this, it will call initializer list, this constructor. Okay, so when you will use curly braces and you will pass some values inside this, okay, then this initializer list constructor will get called. Otherwise, the default constructor will be called. Okay, pass it like this. Again, it will be the same. Now, if you use it like with equals like this, if you create again, it will call a default constructor for this. These two are in slicer list. Okay, and the same if you, as soon as you pass a value into this initializer list, it will call an initializer list constructor. Okay, is there any doubt, any question? Okay, so this was all from my side in initializer list. If you have any question or any doubt, you can ask me.